The Heat lost in overtime to the Magic, a loss that stings after yet another fantastic Jimmy Butler performance. Why does Miami keep losing bad games to bad teams? Plus, has Jimmy become frustrated with a lack of support from his teammates? And Kyle Lowry made his return versus Orlando. How did he do, and what can he do for the Heat during the next 13 games? We break it all down in today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. I'm Wes Goldberg here with David Ramil. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day and for subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. That's PrizePicks.com, promo code Locked On. We'll get to why the Heat keep losing games to bad teams, Spo's comments on officiating, and Kyle Lowry's return in a bit. But first, things are not feeling very good for the Heat right now. They lose to the Magic on Saturday. Jimmy Butler walking off the court with 10 seconds left in overtime. For a moment there, it felt like Jimmy was going to lift the Heat and carry them to one of their more exciting wins of the season. Instead, after hitting an off-balance three-pointer to tie the game at the buzzer at the end of regulation, the Heat just die in overtime. They don't even show up. The Magic end up routing them to the win, an easy win, and wasting a classic Jimmy Butler performance, 38 points. The game tying shot at the buzzer. So I get it. I understand why Jimmy would walk off the court with 10 seconds left in overtime. He's clearly frustrated with the fact that he could do that and the Heat don't win at this point. But I know that this is also a topic of conversation. Like, is that a good look if your leader is walking off the court with still time left in the game, even though the game was already over? It was not technically over. What did you make of Jimmy walking off the court?
Not much. He was absolutely frustrated. He should have been. To have him stay out there for the last 10 seconds of the game was meaningless, especially after officiating, which we'll talk about later on the show, played such a heavy role in some of the decision-making process and the impact it had on the game, especially in key moments down the stretch. So it's kind of like a big FU to the officials. You know, what
is that how you read it?
That's how I did it.
Okay.
That's how I saw it. You know, he's there with you're going to keep me out here for these pointless 10 seconds. We're down 15 or what have you. I mean, you've already taken the game out of my hands. I can't get anything done. We're down by this incredible margin. Really? You want me to stay out here just so I can watch Wendell Carter Jr. celebrate? Who cares? I mean, to me, I think he was more frustrated with the loss, the officiating, and everything else that had transpired over those last few minutes. I don't think he was trying to send a message to the team or Eric Spoelstra.
See, I that's how I read it. I thought that's exactly. I didn't think it was about the officiating at all, and maybe it was. I just that thought never crossed my mind. I thought it was. I'm out here busting my butt. You wanted playoff Jimmy? Here it is. Here's playoff Jimmy. And what did you guys do for me? Nothing. You guys have been begging for playoff Jimmy all season long, and I show up playoff Jimmy, and you guys can't miss. You guys can't make any shots. I go out and score 38 points. I hit a three-pointer. I'm Jimmy Butler. I don't hit three-pointers. I hit a three-pointer to force overtime, and we come into, and then they come out into overtime, and they just start the overtime period with just allowing the Magic to just walk into two layups, and they don't even show up. Like, defensively, that team didn't show up. It was maybe the worst defensive game I've seen the Heat play all season.
Wow.
And so I think that I'm like, yeah, you know what? To me, I thought that was Jimmy, maybe not necessarily sending a message. I don't know if it was that poignant in that moment. I don't know if it was that thought through, but just being like, F this, F you guys. I did everything I could. Maybe it was a little bit of the officiating. It was probably everything, but it wasn't, to me, it wasn't just the officiating. That to me was not a message of the officiating. It was everything involved, including the fact that his teammates didn't step up.
I will tell you, there is something absolutely refreshing and rewarding from being disconnected from all the noise of Heat Twitter and all the varying, the warring factions spouting opinions left and right, none of which have any kind of foundation in reality and actuality, unless Jimmy has over 10,000 burner accounts in order for him to voice his frustration with the team. So I did not have these kinds of outside or external perspectives. I was just watching it. And I was watching that loss, and I remember I did see a comment from somebody after I watched the game, and it said, "Oh, they couldn't even get Jimmy the ball." They only took 4 field goal attempts. They couldn't get anybody the ball. They didn't do anything. Like the Orlando Magic had the speed, they had the momentum, they had the outside shot. And you mentioned they walked into 2 easy layups. Well, aside from that, whenever a ball handler on the Magic side did collapse Miami's defense, they would kick it out to a wide open Jalen Suggs or Wendell Carter Jr. in the corner. And that's what ultimately doomed Miami. I don't think
They
it
didn't
was
take any of it
anything.
away. They didn't take any of it away. They let those guys crash to the paint, get into the paint. You're right. Like it was like, okay, if you're gonna give up threes, the Heat give up threes. Like they give up more threes, literally more corner threes than anybody in the league. The Heat give up the most. That's part of their defensive strategy. But in doing that, they
It
take
burned them.
away the stuff at the paint. And they were just like, no, Magic, have whichever one you want. You want to take the three? There you go. You want to go to the layup? Have a layup. Like whatever you want, you can have it. Yeah. And like, look, it was a Saturday night. I'm not as like in tune with Twitter as I am, on a Tuesday night. I'm trying to have a good time on a Saturday night and watch a Heat game. So I wasn't on Twitter like you were. And I ended up tweeting something at the end of the game, but to me, that was my read of it too. Was I don't really know if people are like upset with Jimmy Butler for walking off the court. I would imagine there's
No.
people like sportsmanship matters and things like that. And I think
screw that.
normally I think I would be somebody like, no, you're the leader of the team. I don't care what you did. You stay on the court out there with your team because you showed him up. He showed him up. He did. Whether he meant to or not, he showed up his teammates and his coaches and the rest of the organization. But I'm telling you, good. I'm glad he showed him up because he was the best player, the only guy who showed up that night for the Heat. Nobody else showed up for the Heat. Nobody.
Well, I think it's telling that he walked off, and the camera angle clearly shows him walking off, and yet there's no hand wringing along the sidelines. There's no teammates getting all pissed off or going, "Hey, you got to come back." Nobody
Spo
even
looked a little
pointing it out to
confused.
Expo.
Spo
Yeah,
just looked a
didn't
little
even
confused because they called the tech on him because he walked off the court. You're not allowed to do that. And Spo was like, "What's this one going to be for? What's this tech going to be for?" And he's like, "Oh, my best player just walked off the court. All right, that one I get."
The tech for not having enough players on the floor. And the broadcast even says Eric Reed was like, "Oh, too many players on the floor for the Heat." No, too few players on the court for the Heat. So nobody knew what the hell was going on.
Right.
So that's why I don't
expect that.
To that point, though, if Jimmy's sending a message, well, damn, dude, you could have sent it a little bit more clearly because nobody seemed to figure it out. That's why I don't think there was a message.
Well, at that point, no, the message. I mean, what's the point of sending the message with 10 seconds left and the game's over? They're not going to come back and win that game. I think that message was. I think that message was delivered in that it was so strange and that they had to figure out what was going on and ask some questions. And maybe they're asking the question. I hope they're asking the question. Boy, I wonder why Jimmy Butler just did that. Was it me? And the answer is going to be yes. Like that was the worst Heat game I saw this year. Besides, if you take Jimmy Butler out of that equation, they had no business being in that game, David. They were down by 10 points when Jimmy Butler checked in with 6 minutes to go. And what happened? Jimmy Butler brought them all the way back and then made a crazy three-pointer where with seconds left, literally ticking off of the clock, looks down at his foot, sees that it's on the line, double clutches, backs that foot up, takes one step back, and then it hits this off-balance three-pointer over two Magic defenders, and it goes in. Jimmy Butler does not take threes, nor does he make threes, and he did that at the end to just give the Heat a chance to beat the Magic, and then they pooped the bed in overtime. Nobody showed up, and Spo even said it after the game, like, usually something like that happens, and your team goes on with some sort of momentum and wins in overtime. Usually you find a way to win. You want to know why Spo knows this? Because it happened when Ray Allen hit that one in the corner. The Heat still had to play overtime against the Spurs, and the Heat won. Yeah. And nobody ever remembers that. You usually just find ways to win. And the Heat just did it. They found a way to lose.
It's an interesting perspective. I didn't really see it. I hope if there was any kind of message delivering from Jimmy's part that the Heat have accepted it, his teammates specifically. Like, he is just not getting the support. We keep banging this drum. We mentioned it last week that he is having statistically his best season with the Heat, and perhaps maybe even the best season of his career.
No doubt. Yep.
And especially increased efficiency. And we've seen him turn up his game even substantially over the last few weeks, and it's been nothing. Like, he was a big part of Miami's win against the Cavaliers on Friday. He was their only good player against the Cavaliers in their loss on Wednesday. And he keeps having these performances that are going wasted, not just on a game-to-game basis, but over the course of the whole season, because, here they are fighting for the 7th seed, and that's not good enough for Jimmy Butler, nor should it be. So I hope everybody else wakes up there. And I know it was a team that was, they were down a couple of players. Bam was struggling all night. Tyler was out because of food poisoning. Kyle Lowry had just made his return after a month. There were a lot of extenuating factors there, but that doesn't mean that you're off the hook. Like
Right.
even if you're Gabe Vincent or Max Strus or anybody else, and I know we should not expect them to have transcendent performances, but at least they have to be complimentary of what Jimmy Butler could do. Like Gabe scored a layup in that overtime loss, and aside from that, I don't know that he did much
Yeah.
all night.
I think it was a message. I don't maybe or I don't know. Again, I don't know that it was that thought through in the moment. I really just think it was frustrations boiling over, and instead of punching something or doing something else, he just walked off the court. Right? He was clearly frustrated. Even asked in the locker room, you scored 38 points, blah blah blah. And he's like, I don't care. He said literally, I
Yeah,
don't give a bleep, is what he said. We lost, and you feel it. That's not
yeah.
just. It didn't just feel like talk. You really felt. You kind of feel it when he said that. Maybe it was also a message to the Miami Heat's front office. We'll get to that next here. But first, David, tell the listener about our sponsors.
Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks, making daily fantasy sports easy for all of you to participate. It's just such a convenient way. It's just you versus the numbers. That's what makes it so easy and so fun to play, because you're not worried about other people betting against you or anything like that. No, it's not about that. It's just about you making an entry against the projected numbers. That's what makes it so simple. You pick 2 to 6 players, and if they'll go score more or less than those PrizePicks projections, you can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. It's no compete against other people. It's just you versus the projections. PrizePicks offers projections at any sports you can watch, including the NBA, of course, men's and women's college basketball, soccer, the WNBA, Eurobasket, disc golf, you name it, they've got it. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy, and they're safe and fast withdrawals. Currently operational over 30 states and Canada. So download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com today and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users receive a 100% instant deposit match of up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. So if you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. If you deposit 50, PrizePicks will give you 50. Don't forget to enter the promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match of up to $100 by downloading the PrizePicks app or going to prizepicks.com today.
Locked On Heat is also available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and wherever else you get podcasts. So please do subscribe. We'll talk about just some of these bad losses that have stacked up here in a second. But we're having this conversation about Jimmy Butler walking off the court, and I can't help but think about Jimmy Butler's previous experiences with other teams, Minnesota, Philadelphia, and how he caused trouble there, and eventually, created some drama with his teammates, with front offices, with coaching staffs, and ended up leaving those teams, kind of forcing his way out or getting traded. And I'm not here to say that that's what's happening right now for the Miami Heat and between the Heat and Jimmy Butler. But I do wonder if maybe he's just looking around and he's just like, what am I even doing? I'm having the best year of my career. We're barely fighting for playoff positioning. Like we're stuck here in the play-in tournament. I'm not getting any help from any of my teammates on a career night. If you look around and, I'm 33 years old, I got a limited career here. It's not like even, in an honest moment, Jimmy Butler's not going to sit here and I'm going to be doing this until I'm 43 years old. So I don't know. It's just a thought that I have is, should the front office be worried watching Jimmy Butler walk off the court with 10 seconds left?
They should be worried about their own job rather than Jimmy Butler's response to it. I think
That's what I'm saying.
but I think that part of it is, Jimmy's going to force a turn, a trade, or he's going to make a big stink or something like that. Like I that's the wrong way of approaching it. And I'm not saying you're doing that, but I'm just saying a lot of people
Right.
probably consider, and especially outside of Miami, like he has this reputation, forcing his way out of Chicago. But that was contractual. That was not necessarily even about them feeling the good team about him, but just contractual.
No, that was, Bulls were trying to go in a different direction for some reason,
Right.
and they didn't want to give him the big money. Yeah.
And then they traded to Minnesota. He would have stayed in Minnesota. He just wasn't a believer in Karl Anthony Towns and what they were assembling there. He didn't think they had the kind of will and dedication. And Andrew Wiggins too was a big part of that. Although I think he was more of a believer in Wiggins' ability. In Philadelphia, that was a pretty well documented clashing between him and Brett Brown. That's not the case in Miami. They've given him carte blanche. He has the authority to, make suggestions regarding trades, additions, and things of that sort. I think it played a part, not a complete part, obviously, in acquiring Kyle Lowry, but it certainly I would imagine that Jimmy had more than a fair share, his fair share of opinion to share regarding Kyle's addition. So that look,
They've
I
given Jimmy Butler the carte blanche, as you said, and the culture fit is definitely there. And I think that Jimmy
yeah, I
Butler
don't
has clearly been happier here than he has
than
been in
anywhere
Philadelphia or
else.
Minnesota. Yeah. Or,
That's fair.
there, but you could easily argue that Minnesota surrounded him with more talent and Philadelphia surrounded him with more talent, right?
Right.
So the Heat are checking off all these other boxes. But the Sixers had the players, man. Like even the Timberwolves, I mean, whatever. Wiggins is much better in Golden State than he was in Minnesota, but like just talent. They had more talent than this Heat team does. And I
Yeah.
think if you're the front office, you got to look at that and be like, well, we gave Jimmy Butler all these other things that he was clearly looking for,
Yeah.
but we really
See,
haven't given him the team that he needs.
yeah, but look, I will say this: Jimmy's really difficult to pin down. Like this is when he first joined the Heat. I remember Michael Pina, now with a Ringer, wrote a profile on Jimmy when he was writing as a freelancer for Vice Sports, which no longer even has a sports department, and it was a fantastic feature on him. Like he went and spent time at Jimmy's home, a lot of dominoes playing, a lot of insane workouts, things of that sort. I think that was when he was with Minnesota, even before he was traded to Philadelphia. And it's just Jimmy is a dichotomy. He cannot be. I don't think he can be clearly labeled any one way other than competitor. Like I think if there's one thing that you could say about Jimmy, it's that he's a competitor.
There it is.
But
That's all I need to know. That's all I need to know.
yes,
And
but
he's a very good basketball player, and he's playing for a 500 basketball team.
But he had the talent in Philadelphia. That wasn't enough to make him happy. He had the talent in Minnesota, to your point, and that wasn't enough to make him happy.
I'm not
And I know
saying
there's
that.
money there, but I think he's got money here. I think he's got talent here. And I think he's got people that are dogs, right? The ones that are competitive, the same level of competitiveness as Jimmy. He's
Yeah,
never really besmirched, at least publicly, his teammates. I know he might have issues with one or two here and there, and that's fine. That happens over the course of the season. But I think we're making a big deal out of this. And look, last year it was a blow up against the Golden State after having lost 4 games in a row.
Yeah.
And you're yelling at Coach Spoelstra, and Udonis is threatening to kill you, etc. And Miami still wound up having the first seed in the Eastern Conference. So I'm not concerned about Jimmy and his attitude.
That spurred a run, and I do want maybe this can have that kind of effect where it turns into something like this kind of spurs on a run for the Miami Heat to put something together. The Heat have not won 3 games in a row in a month. They haven't won 4 games in a row since the middle of December. Like this team can't get out of its own way. And look, I hear everything that you're saying. And stars, the way that they move in the NBA these days, it's almost like relationships. Like your next girlfriend is not going to be like your last girlfriend, right? Like the last one didn't work out and you're kind of looking for different things. You're looking for this girl to check different boxes. And it's like relationships in that way. And I think for a long time, Jimmy Butler was very happy with this new relationship. And I'm not saying that he's not right now, but I think he's also looking around and he's like, why are we a 500 team? Like, why aren't we better than this? And I think you do need to do something for Jimmy Butler, right? I think you do need to look around and say, yeah, I get why. If you're the front office, it is your responsibility to make a lot out of him walking off 10 seconds. Like, you got to ask yourself, like, you got to say, this happened. Why did it happen? And what can we do better to make sure that he's not this frustrated? I don't think this is not going to turn into Jimmy Butler asking for a trade. But if this keeps happening, I would not blame Jimmy Butler for asking for a trade.
But isn't this more like off-season talk? Like none of this changes, whatever his reasons or whatever machinations stem from this, none of it's going to get repaired before Miami heads back to Miami to take on the Utah Jazz on Monday night. Like none of that's going to get fixed. That has to happen in the locker room. And look, this is going back to a point that Eric Spoelstra made. I can't recall exactly when. I think it was following the Knicks loss. Or maybe it was against the Sixers now. Yeah, exactly. We've got everything we need in the locker room. It's just a matter of flipping that switch and understanding the urgency of what's at stake.
I got a news flash. They don't. They don't have all the answers in that locker room. But maybe they have enough to at least put 4 games in a row for the first time since middle of December, right? Maybe they do have enough for that. And so I sympathize with Jimmy Butler. And Jimmy Butler did what every Heat fan wants to do, is just sort of rage quit on the season because it's just been so frustrating. So I get it. We have to talk about
I'm
the
looking.
officiating. We have to talk
Yeah,
about the bad
Kyle Lowry.
losses. We have to talk
Yeah.
about Kyle Lowry. But let's take a break here. We got a ton to get to. Specifically that officiating conversation. I don't love having it, but Spo's making us have it. These recent comments are really interesting.
Mm.
He's just hoping not to get fined. We're going to tell you what he said next. But David, first tell listeners about our sponsor.
Today's episode is brought to you by Built.com. The Built March Madness bracket is here. We know you have a favorite bar or puff, and now's your time to make it count. Go to BuiltMarchMadness.com. That's BuiltMarchMadness.com to vote for your favorites. I'll be voting for the cookies and cream bar, and if you want the Heat to win, then you'll be voting for that bar too. Support your team, support your bar or puff, and when you vote for your favorite bar or puff, you will be entered into a drawing where 50 lucky Locked On listeners will get a free box of Built. Not only that, but one Locked On fan will win a 12-month subscription, a full year to Built, to have Built's best bars or puffs delivered monthly straight to your door. You got to try Built. Built's the best protein bar by far. Seriously, they're so amazing. You won't think they're good for you, but they're all high in protein, low in sugar, and covered in 100% real chocolate. That's right, real chocolate. So run to BuiltMarchMadness.com right now to vote for your favorite bar or puff and pick up a box while you're there. You can vote every day in March, so hop in and support your pick.
Reach Locked On Heat on Twitter, Instagram. You can email us at lockedonheat@gmail.com. So this Heat loss to the Magic, another one of the bad ones. The Magic are feisty. They're kind of fun. Paolo Banchero, Franz Wagner, everybody loves these guys. But they're bad. They're a bad basketball team in that they don't win a lot of games, right? Like, they're plucky. They play hard, but they're not a winning basketball team. The Heat go into Orlando needing nothing but wins right now. And they drop that game in overtime, wasting a Jimmy Butler classic performance. Just another bad loss for the Heat this year. And so I want to read this from Ira Winderman put this together for the Sun Sentinel. I thought it was a really good idea to just kind of list, like, it, because it feels so frustrating. Why does it feel so frustrating? It's because this keeps happening for the Miami Heat. They just keep losing games that they should not lose. So here's the list that Ira put together here. October 19th, the Heat, the opening night, right? You lose to a Bulls team without Zach LaVine or Lonzo Ball. We didn't realize Lonzo Ball was just like never going to play basketball game again, but that was a bad loss. November 18th, you lose to the Wizards in overtime because you scored 2 points in the entire overtime period. Kind of felt like this Magic one. The Heat were without Jimmy Butler, Tyler Hero, Bam in that game, but still they had a chance to win, and the Wizards stink, so they should have won. They lose to the Grizzlies on December 5th, 101-93. Lose to a Grizzlies team with no John Morant, no Jaren Jackson, no Desmond Bane. You have no business losing that game. They lose to the Pistons the next day. The Pistons stink. You should not lose to the Pistons. No excuse. December 10th, you lose to the Spurs. The Spurs are trying to lose games. Like, no team left that arena happy that night. Why are you losing to the Spurs? December 30th, you lose to the Nuggets. It was a game where you had a chance at the end there, and to get a signature win in Denver, and you can't make a shot, and so that was a problem. January 4th against the Lakers. Remember, there was no LeBron no.
No LeBron or AD in that one.
No LeBron or AD. It was just a bunch of Lakers nobodies, and it was before all the trades went down. 2 losses against Charlotte that I don't have to remind anybody about. You lose to the Nets right before the All-Star break, which was after the Kevin Durant trade. Mikal Bridges had 45 points. That was sort of the, hey, Mikal Bridges, this guy's pretty good night. So he had his coming out party to the rest of the league against the Miami Heat. And then, of course, this Magic game. So it's 11 games. Now, over the course of a regular season, David, you're going to drop games. You're going to lose games that you're not supposed to lose. That's just going to happen. But 11 of them, that's really tough for a team that's in the bubble right now of the play-in tournament. You just take half of those. Okay.
Yeah, that's
losing
exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, go for it.
No, that's exactly what I was thinking. You win 5 of those games, and you're not worried. You're looking ahead and saying, you know what, we could supplant Brooklyn in the 6th seed. We could even catch up to the Knicks for the 5th seed. Instead,
you could be talking about home court, potentially fighting for home court right now. Yeah,
that's a good point. Yeah, it is really demoralizing. The 2 Charlotte losses in particularly, because that's a team that's really, really bad too. And again, plucky, whatever. They beat the Knicks recently. That shouldn't be enough. Like, I don't know.
Nope.
And there's no answer for why these things happen other than what Jimmy keeps alluding to, right? They take their foot off the gas collectively as a group. I'm sure he shares some blame for that on occasion, but we have looked at some poor Jimmy performances over the course of the season. We know he has not been 100% all the time, but that's every player. Even Giannis, Jokic, Embiid, the top MVP candidates, they've had bad games before, certainly. And I think that's going to happen here. But it's the continued lack of support from guys like Max Strus, Gabe
And
Vincent,
that and
etc.
it's just why I keep coming back to the same thing. This team's not that good. Like, it's just not. And you could tell me, like, hey, they were a shot away from the finals last year and all that stuff. Number 1 seed in the East. They were. They were. That was a good team. This team's not. I don't know why. It's just not a good team. It's like this team is not the team it was last year. And that's what a mediocre team does. They lose games like that. 5 games, like you said, like if you lose 5 of those games instead of 11 of them, that's not. It hurts. It doesn't crush your season. That kind of stuff can kill an entire season, and it looks like it might. It very well might, because you got 13 more games to play. Who's going to say they're not going to drop more games that they're supposed to lose?
Oh,
Let's talk.
I thought I did that, by the way. Just to add that, I went ahead and looked at the 13 games ahead of the schedule. I was like trying to figure out, they can finish 10-3. Optimistically, that's like their best case scenario. They could finish 9. I can't wait. I can't predict any of those games.
No,
I don't. They could go and beat
unpredictable.
Brooklyn. Yeah, they could go beat Toronto and then lose to Detroit the next day. Like that's just the way this team is made up. We have no way of knowing on a night-to-night basis what's going to happen.
Kyle Lowry played his first game since February 2nd. He played 36 minutes off the bench in his first game back. This against the Magic. How do you look to you, David?
Off and on, like rusty, but I think overall pretty good. I unfortunately wound up playing 36 minutes because of the loss of Tyler Herro to food poisoning, so he wound up playing more than expected. But he had some good moments. 8 points, specifically in the fourth quarter, a couple of threes. Was able to get to the rim too. Like I mean, that's defensively. I can understand the concerns for a lot of people. I know he's still going to get blown past, but I think it was within the context of what he thought Miami's defense would be able to do in terms of somebody being able, like he was funneling people towards the painted area, not necessarily just getting blown past, with the thought that process that Bam or somebody else would be able to help on the weak side there and try to make up for that initial blow by. But he was still solid enough. Like he had a big play, like poking the ball free from Markelle Fultz in winning moments of that fourth quarter in regular, during the
regulation
48 minutes. Yeah. Regulation. Sorry. And he poked the ball free. He wound up leading to a missed opportunity that got blocked by Fultz, but still good overall defensively, I think, and solid.
And you impact. He does impact the game on offense. Like you could see him trying to speed up the tempo in a way that, like, that's just not what Gabe Vincent does, for better or worse. Like whatever. It's just Lowry. He does do that thing where you feel him on the court, right? Like you're like, oh, this guy is impacting the tempo of the game. And it wouldn't be this way if he were off the court, right? And so I think that was kind of interesting to see again in the context of this new offense with Kevin Love and just some of the changes, like schematic things that you and I have gone over. To see him kind of reintroduced to this more than a month after he's last played was sort of interesting to me. Defensively, I don't know what to make of that. Was everybody sucked on defense, so I've nothing to say about Lowry specifically.
Can I just say, look, that he shows up as a -17 in blocks plus minus, and then Victor 3 of 13 Oladipo shows up as a +1. That just goes to show you why that statistic means absolutely nothing.
Kyle Lowry after the game saying, "In my heart, I know that I'm a starter." I don't know if that means something along the lines of he's going to keep coming off the bench. It kind of, based on Spo's comments, it sounded like, they're just trying to ease him in. And like you said, they didn't want to play him 36 minutes. Spo said that after the game. He looked at his card and he was like, oh my God, I played this guy 36 minutes. And to your point, Tyler Herro, food poisoning, overtime, having to play overtime minutes. Also, I'm just going to throw this out there. Bam, I texted this to you during the game. Like, I was like, is he sick? Because this was the slowest I've seen Bam all season. Like, he didn't look right out there. And if there's a food poisoning thing happening, I don't know if him and Tyler went to the same restaurant and Tyler just, I don't know what was going on. But Bam didn't look right. And I'm just throwing that out there because I don't think that was a lack of effort on Bam. It literally looked like he was sick. Like I've never seen that kind of lack of hustle, lack of just like speed and strength from Bam ever. It was it was the weirdest game I've ever seen Bam play. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, like, this is a point that's been building, I think, amongst that same rather loud section of Heat Twitter, that he's been carrying the load so much throughout the course of the season. He's taken his game to another level. He's doing so much defensively that following the All-Star break, he's kind of just like notably taken his foot off the gas individually, like not just collectively as a team, but individually, he is not playing with the same intensity and urgency, which is kind of weird because this is exactly when he needs to. And I don't know what to make of it because I don't want to trash Bam.
No, that's literally why I text. I'm like, I think he's sick. Like I literally like, does this guy have the flu? And then all the reporting about Tyler Herro with the food poisoning came out after, and I was like, maybe both these dudes ate at the same restaurant in Orlando. You know, like there's a
Yeah,
Taco
but he's
Bell
also had
around
some
the
bad.
corner from Amway that's not great. Like I've gotten food poisoning from it too. So maybe they ate that Taco Bell and they were like, you know what, just not gonna be able to play this game. All right, let's move on to the officiating conversation because Spoelstra let him have it after the game. And this has been a conversation going on across the league. But Spo, after the game, clearly frustrated with a couple of calls. Number one, Jimmy Butler, like midway through the game, got called for a blocking foul when he got a shot to the face. Butler got called for the foul. Spo was very upset about it. During the game, had the words with the referees, went back and forth the whole time. And that conversation basically just went on for the rest of the game. Like Spo was very animated with the refs for the entire night, like all game, more as much as I've ever seen Spo animated with the refs. And then Cody Zeller taking a shot
His nose broke.
from Jalen Suggs later in the game, broke his nose, no call. Like Cody Zeller literally leaving the floor, holding his nose onto his face.
Right.
Just
bleeding into a towel.
bleeding into a towel. No call.
What do you think? What do you make of Suggs? What do you make of Suggs?
I really like him.
Do you?
I liked him a lot at Gonzaga. I was really high on him during the pre-draft process. He's got like that. He is the guy that breaks the other guy's nose, and I kind of like that. I obviously don't like that it happened to the Heat, but in general, I kind of like those kinds of guys because Udonis Haslem is that like that's a Heat guy. Like Heat guys break people's noses, so I like Jalen Suggs. It's been an up and down start to his career, but and I know Magic fans are like, what do we have here? I was like, is this a bust? And kind of, I'm not. I think it's way too early for that. I think that there's a good player in there.
He's so out of control. Like he has no idea what to do. He's got all this physicality to him. He's like diving and throwing himself around.
Well, he was Mr. Football, I think. He grew up in Minnesota. He was Mr. Football and Mr. Basketball.
Seems apparent,
so I'm like maybe he's not sure which sport he's playing sometimes.
Incorporating a little bit of one into the other, that's fine. Like he is a little out of control out there. It's interesting. I don't know.
Yeah, if he could kind of put it together, like I said, I think there's a good basketball player in there. But you're right. It's a little wild out there.
It's hard playing him. Yeah.
So all this leads to Spo saying that he thinks that egos got in the way and that the officials got the last laugh in being able to call that final tech on Jimmy Butler, and then obviously when he walked off the court with 10 seconds left, and then obviously the Heat losing. I think Spo was referencing that as well. So he thinks that all this happened. He said, "Do not fine me," and I'm pretty sure that that's not the way it works. But this is on the heels of Fred VanVleet, a week ago, getting fined $30,000 because he said that refs are just messing up all the time, that going after Ben Taylor by name, saying that 2 out of 3 refs on every staff are calling him, usually bad words and things like that. Just some fine language being used there. So all this has been a conversation. This has been a conversation all year long. You know me. I hate this conversation. I think this is the most boring sports radio you can do is talk about officiating. But Spo is making us have that conversation right now because he's coming. He doesn't usually do this kind of thing either, but he's doing it, and he's obviously frustrated. What did you make of all that?
Just frustration on his part too. I think he's kind of built to a head there, and he just was voicing it. I don't think he understands the role of the officials. He lets them have it. He's pretty well known for that, and I think after 16 years now of coaching, he's very comfortable letting referees know when they've made mistakes, and he has no problems letting them know. So I don't read too much into it. I don't think it's a continued problem. I think everybody who has an emotional investment in any sport whatsoever is going to see a problem with the officiating.
But what's interesting, the comments themselves, David, like what Fred VanVleet was saying was like, it kind of felt like Ben Taylor's out to get me. This ref is out to get me. And then you have Spo basically saying the same thing, not about Ben Taylor, but same thing in this game, saying egos getting away. They had the last laugh, to insinuate that they were looking for the last laugh. That's implying that referee was out to get him. That to me is more interesting. It's just the complaining. I mean, complaining happens all the time. These guys have been complaining to officials forever, ever since there were referees. But this is new. This stuff is new.
Yeah, do you think there's a personal attack on Erik Spoelstra there, or the Heat? I don't know. It's easy to make that kind of. Maybe he doesn't like, and who knows? Who knows? We're only getting Spoelstra. We never hear from the refs, but you wonder, has he at some point. Has Spo directed a comment at the referee, and he's just remembered it over the years, and that's why he's just going to let him have it whenever possible? I mean, I don't think he goes out of his way necessarily to attack Eric Spoelstra in the Heat, but it's kind of how it looks.
But that's what they're implying, right? And that's what's so strange about it. So I don't know what's going on, but this is, to me, like, I ignore this stuff. I ignore this conversation because to me it is boring, and it doesn't lead anywhere. You can complain about the officiating all you want, and then at the end of the day, the outcome was still the outcome, right? So it doesn't matter to me. But when you have players and coaches implying that there are referees out to get them, that is a serious accusation. I mean, this is the same league where there was referees getting in trouble for gambling on the sport, right? Like, when you go after the integrity of these guys, and the fact that Fred VanVleet only got 30,000, I thought it was going to be more, because you're not just complaining about calls, you're going after the integrity of specific officials. I'm not saying he shouldn't have done it if he really feels that way, because enough people are saying this kind of thing now where I'm like, I don't know. I'm not saying that there is something to it, but maybe there's something to it, because like, we've never heard this before. That's what's so interesting about it. Like, this specific accusation.
There've always been that sense, right? Like, oh, he's a hard ass. You know, you don't want to go after that guy. There's only so much you can say against X referee, blank referee's name. You know,
Do you think
it's
they're
like,
just being more open about it, that they've always felt this way, but they've always been like, I hate that guy and that guy hates me too, and we know it?
yeah, or
Maybe.
I don't even know that it's that personal, like animosity. Like, I don't think it's that real. It's just like within the context of the working situation of coach or player versus referee, there's bound to be tension. Like, oh, there's that customer who's always a dick. He always comes in here and he always gives me a hard time. But that doesn't necessarily make him a bad person. And if I see him outside of the context of whatever my business is, or, you know, let's say you're a food server or something like that, they come in and they gives you a hard time. If you see them in another place, they might be nice. Who knows?
I have a feeling that Ben Taylor would not be nice to Fred VanVleet if they run into each other.
Not after this.
Buffalo Wild Wings or something. Like, that's right. That's what I'm saying. Right? Not good point. Yeah, not after this, I guess. But
yeah, who knows? He could have repaired that
again, like, they're burning that. Like, it's not burning a bridge, because I don't know that it means that much other than the $30,000 that Fred VanVleet no longer has. But
well, I'm curious.
Spo's going to get fined. You know,
the next time this official goes against the Heat, I imagine Spo's going to pick up another.
It's going to be interesting, right? But you and I, like, as people who cover this team, it's something that we have to monitor, right? Like, next time it's this staff, we have to look at what happens. We have to look at that relationship, because it's a thing.
It's James Williams, right? That's his name.
James Williams. And his staff, like, when they work a Heat game, we're gonna have to at least look at it. All right. That's it. That's all I got for today.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Remember to subscribe to new episodes of Locked On Heat on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Ring the bell to get notified as soon as new episodes go up. Now make your second listen game to game, NBA, every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the NBA with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NBA. It's available on the Odyssey app and YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. David, thanks for joining me.
Absolutely. Let's go to Buffalo Wild Wings.